Hi guys, welcome to exercise 2 for COSC10 tutorial number 3. So in this exercise you'll be going through a similar example or a similar process to what we followed in lecture number 6. I've given you a file of inconsistent data, so if you download the dirty data.xlsx file, you'll be presented with a list of names. So you've got some records here with a first name, a middle initial and a last name. And if you look down through this list, you'll see that the data is a bit messy. So you've got first names and last names that are both in upper and lower case that have upper and lower case for the first letter. You've got some entries that actually have additional white spaces at the start of them, and you've also got some that actually contain some double quote characters in there as well. So the aim of this exercise is actually to clean all of this data up so that there's no leading or trailing white space. There's only the single first character if there's multiple middle initials, and we want to convert the middle initial to upper and lower case, and we want to have proper case for all of the other entries. So we want each name, both the first name and last name, to have an uppercase first character followed by lowercase characters. We don't want any of the double quote characters in there, and we don't want any of the white spaces. So this data, it's designed to simulate dirty data that you might extract from another enterprise system. So if you have a web-based system that collects free text information that users can just type into a web page, for example, it may contain some of these aberrations or these inconsistencies that we need to remove in order for the data to be used effectively in other systems or to be used for presentation or analysis. So we'll move on in. The first thing we're going to do is clean up the first name. Now, we can start by looking at the top here. I've already put some column headings in. Now, this is going to be a multi-step process. So obviously there's a few things that need to go on. We need to remove the white space, remove the double quote marks, and correct the case. Now, we're going to do these in different steps, and then at the end we can actually compile them into a single formula that can be implemented in a single cell. So we'll start by looking at column D here. Now, because it's a multi-step process, I'm going to insert another column. And in this column we're going to start with the initial phase, so we'll call this column step 1. And we're going to start by removing these double quote characters. Now, the reason we're going to start with these is because we can see in this entry 18 that there's white space within that double quote character. So if we don't remove that first, we can't actually get at this white space. Very easy to remove it. So we're going to use the substitute function to achieve this. We looked at the substitute function in lecture 6, and basically it allows us to go through and remove one piece of text and replace it with another piece of text. Now, in this situation, the piece of text that we want to remove is actually just this double quote character, and we're going to replace it with nothing. So to do that, we'll go and enter in our substitute formula. So if we go up here and we use our equal sign to start our formula off and start typing our substitute, you can see that it does actually start autofilling for us, so you can just follow that along. And we can see here that first thing we need to enter is the text that we want to work on. So in this situation we're working on the first name text, so I'm going to select field A2. Now, the text we want to replace is actually our double quote character. Now, because this particular parameter is a string of text, we need to surround it by double quote characters, and then the character we want to remove, is actually our double quote. Now, we have an interesting problem here. Because the double quote character is part of the definition of the string, Excel doesn't know how to interpret what we've just put in, so we need to escape that double quote character. So what we mean by escape is we need to tell Excel to use that to interpret that double quote character as a string. So if we try to enter in the formula as it is at the moment, new text, and our new text we want to replace it with nothing, so an empty string, we'll find that we'll end up with an error. So you can see here it said the formula that you've typed contains an error, and that's because it can't actually figure out what's going on with this middle string here. So what's happening there is it's actually messing up how to interpret that string. So we need to escape that middle quote character there, and we do that with another double quote character. So if we put 4 quotes in a row, we've got our surrounding quotes for our string, we've got our escape character, we've got our double, and we've got the double quote character that we want to remove. It'll be quite happy to accept that formula. Now we can see that for most of the entries it's not going to do anything because there's no double quotes, but if we fill that formula down, we can see for entry number 14 and entry number 18 here it's actually removed those double quotes. So we've completed step 1 of our cleanup phase. Now we're going to move to step number 2. So we'll actually in this step we're going to remove the white space that we don't want. So if we look at our step number 1 result, we can see that we've still got some white space in several entries as we move down our spreadsheet here. Now we're going to remove that white space by using the trim function. Again, we looked at the trim function in lecture 6. And it actually removes any leading or trailing space characters from an entry. So if we just enter in our trim function here and it just accepts our intermediate results. So remember, we're moving along in a series of steps. So step 1, we remove the double quote character. Step 2, we'll operate on the result from step 1. So we've entered that in there. We've entered that formula. If we fill that down, we can see that it's actually removed the leading and trailing white spaces. So looking down our list, we've almost got our first name cleaned up. The final thing we need to do is correct the case. So we'll actually enter that directly into our clean first name column here, and we can clean up the case. So recall from our exercise, we want this list to be in proper case, and what we mean by proper case is we have an uppercase first letter followed by lowercase. We can do that using the proper function. Again, we covered the proper function in lecture 6. If we drop that in there, throwing in our step 2 result, we can actually fill that down and we'll see immediately that it consistently puts all of our entries in proper case. Now we can see here that we've ended up with a nice clean first name field. Now we can actually go and nest all of these formulas, all of these calls within each other, starting with the last call on the outside. So if we go along here and we actually take the trim function, we put the trim function in there. We can nest it inside. We can nest it. Oops. So put that one on the outside. We nest. We replace that in, and we actually want to trim, and then we'll nest the substitute function inside the trim function. So it's kind of like one of those babushka dolls. We work from the inside out. We can nest that one. Oops, we didn't save that properly. Go and grab the trim function that we created. We'll nest that within here. Hit enter, then grab our substitute function. I'm using the Control-C command to copy that one over. We nest that inside here. You can see that we've created one long procedure there that will actually remove all of that, and we no longer need, I'll just double check that actually, we no longer need any of these intermediate steps, so we can just delete those 2 columns and fill that one down, and we've finished. So now we've combined all of those formulas into one by nesting them, starting with the last one first, second last, and the first one that we did inside all of those inside our formula for our clean first name field. So by breaking the problem down, we've been able to work out a series of steps, and then we've nested them all inside as function calls in our final formula. Now we're going to follow through the same process to clean up the last name. Now, if we look down the last name column, it's actually fairly clean. We only actually need to perform 2 operations. We need to do a trim operation to clean up the white space, and actually that's all we need to do. We don't even need to do a proper case operation because all of the names are in proper case. So if we just go over here and quickly do a trim operation on our last name, we'll immediately clean that one up straight away. So That's all it's required to clean up the last name. Now the middle initial is a little bit messy again because we have some spaces, we have some characters we don't want in there, and it's all in mixed case. So we're going to need, again, to do multiple operations. So I'm going to start by inserting a new column, and again we'll call that step 1 to start with. Step 1. Now the first thing I think we'll do is remove some of the white space. So you can see here this third entry down has a white space before the J character there. So if the first operation we perform is a trim operation, oops, I put that in lowercase, needs to be in uppercase, a trim operation on that column, we'll clear that white space out. And we can see there that we've wiped out our white space. Then we'll need the next step. So the next step is to actually go and grab only the first initial. Now, we can grab that first character on the left-hand side by using the left function. So we'll label this one step 2. Step 2, and we'll actually use the left function. Now, by default, the left function, if we don't specify a number of characters, it'll grab the first character on the left-hand side of a cell. So in this situation, we're going to grab our intermediate result, drop it in there, and we'll grab our single left-hand character. So you can see in the case of our JC initials here, we've only grabbed the J initial. Now we're almost there. The final thing we need to do is put our middle initial in uppercase. We're going to do that using the upper function. So if we go and type in upper, so we covered the upper function in lecture 6, and it actually converts all of the characters in a given string to uppercase. So in this situation, we're only going to have one character in there. To pick that out, and we go down and we drop that in, and we can see we've fixed up our middle initial and cleaned it all up, so there's only one character in there. So now we need to go through and nest all of our formulas all of the functions that we've used to clean that up in steps 1 and 2 into our final formula. So again, we leave the final formula on the outside of our nest, on the outside of our expression. We go and grab this formula, our second last formula, and drop it inside. So again, Control C to copy that one. We go back, we hit escape, and we go back to our other cell, and we paste it in. And you can see it's immediately fixed that up. Hit enter, hasn't changed it, and then we go and grab our trim function here, and we'll drop that reference, we'll nest that inside in the innermost formula, which in this case is our left formula. Nested that in, and then we'll go down and copy those. So we'll delete steps 1 and 2 because we no longer need them. We've sorted all out what we need to do, and then we fill that one down. We sorted that out. So now the final 2 operations we need to perform here are to create a full name and a username. Now our full name needs to consist of our first name, our middle initial, and our last name. Now we're going to be working on our clean first name and last name because we want to have a nice, pretty presentable full name to use in our other systems. Now we're going to do that using the string concatenation operation. There's 2 ways you can do it. You can either use the concatenate function or you can use the concatenate operator. And we're going to use the concatenate operator because it's a little bit easier to understand. So we want to concatenate the first name. So we're going to select that one, and we're going to then put the ampersand operator, which is the concatenation operator, the middle initial, and then another concatenation operator, and the last name. So basically we're going to glue all of those strings together, all of those text blocks together into a name. Now you can see that we've done that, but we've got a problem. We don't have any spaces in there. So we need to actually go and insert some space strings into our formula. So we do that by simply adding a string that contains only a space character. And again, we have to add some concatenation operators around that one to actually make it all concatenate and glue together. So if we go and add a space between our first name and our middle initial, and a space between our middle initial and last name, we have to double quote them because the space character is a string, and we use that and we add those additional concatenation operators. You can see that we've got our nice presentable full name, and we can use that in our nice pretty reports and graphs and all sorts of stuff that this data might be linked to. The final exercise here is actually to create a username. Now we've given you a specification for your username. The username will consist of the first character of the first name followed by the first 5 characters of the last name. So it's kind of like your UNE username in a way. So in order to do this, again, we might actually go and break this down into a set of steps. So step 1 is to grab our username, the first letter from our first name. So we can do that by using, so we'll call that step 1, and we'll do that by actually going and using the left function again. So if we go left, and we'll grab the first letter from our clean first name. So you can see that we've got our first name, our first letter there, and then we'll move on to step 2. So that's the first component we need, and then we need to grab the component from the last name. I'm actually just going to extend this a little bit more so we can get it all onto one sheet. So we're actually going to now go in step 2, oops, I'll capitalize that, step 2, and we're going to grab the first 5 characters of the last name. And again, we can use the left function to do this, but in this particular situation, we're going to tell it how many characters from the left we're going to grab. Now if we go insert our last name there, and we're going to grab the first 5 characters from the left by specifying the number of characters parameter. So you can see in this particular situation we've grabbed, I'll just fill those down, we've grabbed the first 5 characters, which happens to be the whole name in the case of the second situation. You can see in the case of, in record number 8, there's only actually 4 characters in the last name, so we've grabbed all of them, that's fine. The next thing is we need to join them together. So I'm going to actually insert another step here. So you join them together. So we're almost there. We've got our components. Now we'll join them together using our concatenation operation. So if we go equals, we'll concatenate this one. Oops, no, sorry. We don't want that one. We want this one. Concatenate column H with column I, and you can see that we've actually got our username. Now it looks a little bit messy because it's got mixed case, so we might actually just make that all lowercase as well. So if we go lower, this one, oops, lower, open brackets, close them, you can see that we've got our username now. So we can go through and collapse those. Collapse that down. However, we have to be very careful when we do the concatenation. So if we collapse that down, we can grab the contents of this one here. We might actually use the concatenation formula for that one. So if we concatenate, makes it a little bit neater to do. When we go to do it, we'll fill that one down. So if we use the concatenation operation, doesn't make any difference. Oops, we haven't filled that correctly. Doesn't make any difference to the output, but it does it as an operation. So we can now go and we can nest our concatenation operation here into our lower operation. So we cut and paste that in. Hit enter, doesn't make any difference, and then we can go and we can replace our 2 entries. So in this situation we have to nest 2 function calls in there. We just have to nest the step 2 function call in there as well. In place of this one here. So we cut and paste them in. We'll go through and delete all these intermediate steps because we don't need them anymore. And we fill that formula all the way down. And then we've created our nice nested formula, a single operation there. So you can see by breaking this process down, so breaking the process of cleaning each field up down into a series of steps, it makes it much easier to go through and rationalize what needs to happen in order to clean up that data. So I encourage you to do that. Don't be afraid to add intermediate steps and then go back and nest them all into one result later on. That's the easiest way to create a working solution to these problems. So make sure you review this exercise carefully, because you may see a similar exercise in the spreadsheet assignment. So thanks guys, and if you have any questions, please send them in.